Next, we move on to the panel 5 of the day of the conference, that is Hindu Dharma. The theme of that conference is Hindu Dharma and its influence on life choices and decision making. I would now call upon Priya Samant, who is going to be the moderator of this session, to be on the screen, and I will just give you a short bio on Priya. Priya Samant is a change maker and a multi-talented professional with experience working on presidential campaign with non-profit leaders, C-level executives, and at grassroots levels. Priya's work is on intersection of frontier tech, politics, and film and entertainment. She has coined the title Impact Advisor, which will be given as credit in Bollywood movies, Bollywood feature films as well, and documentary, which showcases social impact. She's also a theater artist and part of Setu theater community in Greater Boston area. I now call upon Priya Samant to conduct the next panel. Thank you, Priya, and welcome to all the panelists.
Thank you so much for that kind introduction. So good morning, everyone. A big welcome for being part of this very informative and important session called Lightning Talks, where the speakers will share in 7 minutes their perspectives on how their dharmic heritage is influencing. So on this panel, I am very honored to have speakers from India, Singapore, and the United States. We all are very lucky to be born in a country which is home to one of the oldest civilizations of the world. The manuscript traditions played a very vital role in the preservation of our knowledge system. With that being said, Professor Jha has over 25 years of experience working in project management, multimedia creation, software design, and integration. He is the head of the Cultural Informatics Laboratory of the Indira Gandhi National Center for Arts, where his team integrates the Indian arts and information technology. He's also the director of National Mission of Manuscript with the Government of India. Professor Jha will be speaking on a very important topic. Professor Jha, the floor is yours. Professor Jha?
Yeah, I'm audible.
Professor Jha?
Yeah, I'm audible.
Can you hear me?
I am audible. Hello.
Professor Jha, the floor is yours.
Yes, we can hear you, Professor.
Yeah. On the occasion, namaste.
The floor
everyone.
is yours, Professor Jha. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Namaste. On the occasion of the 50th year of the World Hindu Council of America, I extend my heartiest congratulations to all its members. I would also like to thank the organizers, especially Dr. Jai Bansal and Dr. Priya Samant, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the National Mission for Manuscripts on this forum. India is the repository of an astounding belt of ancient knowledge belonging to different periods of history dating back to thousands of years. This knowledge has been preserved and been handed down from one generation to the other, both in the oral and written forms. These include the subjects like Vedas, Vedangas, Dharmasastras, Puranas, Itihas, and many others. In written form, this vast corpus of literature is spread across different languages and scripts and is available to us on different kinds of materials like birch bark, palm leaf, cloth, wood, stone, and paper. Nalanda, Takshashila, and Bikramshila universities were well-known repositories of manuscripts. Gilgit manuscripts, which cover monastic disciplines, medicine, tantra of 6th century AD, are some of the rarest specimens of written documents on birch bark. With the passage of time, knowledge about the manuscripts has certainly increased. It is now clear that the ancient manuscripts not only exist in Sanskrit, but also in other scripts and languages such as Pali, Prakrit, relating to Jainism and Buddhism. There is also a vast range of manuscripts in Persian and Arabic which records various aspects of society since 10th century AD. The following general assessment can be made about the manuscripts wealth of India. India perhaps has the largest collection of manuscripts in the world. These manuscripts are in different languages and scripts. They are written on different kinds of material like birchbark, palm leaf, cloth, paper. They are in the custody of the different institutions like libraries, research institutes, museums, monasteries, mutts, and individuals. Only a small percentage of these manuscripts have been surveyed and catalogued. The available catalogues do not follow a standard format. A significant portion of the manuscripts are not conserved scientifically. The issue of preservation of the manuscripts presents significant challenges. Some of these have disappeared while some are in the state of damage or decay. A significant part of it is unknown, inaccessible, and fragmented. It is in this context that the Ministry of Culture, Government of India, set up the National Mission for Manuscripts, or NMM, in the year 2003 with the following objectives: to document and create online catalog of Indian manuscripts, to provide access to these manuscripts through publications and digitization, to facilitate the conservation of manuscripts, to boost scholarship and research in the study of Indian languages and manuscriptology, and to build up a national digital manuscripts library. The Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts, or IGNCA, is the nodal agency for the National Mission for Manuscripts. To achieve the objectives set before the mission, the NMM established over 100 manuscript resource centers called MRCs and manuscript conservation centers called MCCs all across India. Generally, MRCs and MCCs are hosted in the state archives, libraries, and institutions having large collection of manuscripts. As on date, over 4 million manuscripts have been catalogued and made available on the NMM website for the researchers and scholars. The manuscripts get damaged with time mainly due to the environmental conditions, insects, mishandling, storage conditions, etc. The NMM undertakes the preventive and the curative conservation of the damaged manuscripts through the manuscript conservation centers. NMM so far conserved 82 million folios of the manuscripts. For creating awareness about the conservation of the manuscripts, workshops on conservation are generally organized on regular intervals through NMM in the institutions having manuscripts collections which need immediate intervention for conservation. To familiarize students with local scripts prevalent in their area as well as the ancient scripts like Brahmi, Sarda, Modi, Grantha, Tiglari, etc., in which a number of manuscripts are found all over the country, the NMM organizes basic level and advanced level courses on manuscriptology and paleography in collaboration with the universities and academic institutions. In addition, 1-year PG diploma course in manuscriptology and paleography has been instituted at IGNCA since last 2 years. As mentioned earlier, one of the stated mandates of the mission is to make the manuscripts accessible to the scholars and researchers by establishing a digital manuscripts library. As on date, over 300,000 manuscripts containing over 32 million pages have been digitized and are in process of integration for public access. To promote research, the NMM organizes seminars in different parts of the country, mainly in collaboration with the academic institutions, to bring together the academicians and experts of different disciplines and provide them a common platform to exchange knowledge, information, and ideas about the various aspects of manuscriptology. These seminars are generally based on the topics associated with the knowledge enshrined in the Indian manuscripts. Later, the papers presented in these seminars are published in a book form by the mission. To disseminate the knowledge contained in unpublished Indian manuscripts, critical editions and critical edition with translations of such manuscripts is published by the mission. The NMM has published over 100 books so far under the various publication series. All the publications are available on NMM website for free access. One of the mandates of the mission is to preserve the Indic origin manuscripts that are located abroad. It is expected that the NMM will soon start the pilot activity in Thailand, Vietnam, and Maldives in collaboration with the like-minded institutions and later expand it to the other parts of the world. The preservation of the manuscript's wealth is a huge task and it is difficult to achieve without public support. Hence, on behalf of NMM, I urge all of you who know about the important manuscripts which needs immediate attention and care, kindly inform NMM for necessary action. And finally, the ultimate aim of the mission is to decipher these manuscripts, initiate multidisciplinary research, validate the output scientifically, and contextualize it based on the today's requirements to improve the lifestyle of the people universally. Then only the purpose of the mission will be fulfilled. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Jha. This was really helpful, the information that you said. So our next panelist is also from India, Rami Desai. Rami is a graduate from King's College in Theology and Anthropology of Religion. She's an author and columnist with an expertise in the Northeast region of India, having spent many years in some of the most conflict-ridden areas. Her new book, Religious and Cultural Transitions in the Northeast, will be released soon worldwide. Congratulations, Rami, for this huge success. She's also a passionate advocate for Indian arts and artisans. Her talk is Guru Shishya Parampara, Dharma, Karma, and Modern Life. So Rami, the floor is yours. Rami, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Namaskar. Before I begin my talk, I would like to thank the World Hindu Council of America, Jai Ji, Piyaji, and all the organizers for having me on board for this very thought-provoking discussion titled Influence of Heritage on Life Choices and Decisions. When I was told of this title, the first thing that came to my mind was the tradition of the Guru Shishya Parampara. I doubt we can imagine walking on the path of Dharma with the influence of our heritage without this tradition. After all, I think the magnificent history of Bharat is rooted in its knowledge and respect of culture and tradition, with the Guru Shishya Parampara being central to the continuity and evolution of not just the Sanatan Dharma, but also to the individual development of the Sanatani. Therefore, the highest respect is accorded to the parampara. For instance, in Hinduism, the physical manifestation of God is in the form of the Guru. Therefore, as we may have all heard, the very popular shlok, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Guru Deva. This is recited daily in honor of the Guru. However, traditionally, the Guru Shishya Parampara in its simplest form defines the relationship between the teacher and the student and the bond that ties them together. The ceremonies around this tradition are very reflective of this extremely special bond that is between the Guru and the Shishya. For instance, to give you an example, in some of the ceremonies on the right hand wrist of the disciple, the Guru ties a moli while he chants mantras and puts jaggery and coriander seeds in the mouth of the Shishya, followed by a dakshina. Of course, there are many forms to this ritual, but this is one of them. Dakshina, as per our religious scriptures and texts, is the right part of the body. That is the south direction. It is believed that the ego resides in this particular part. Therefore, offering dakshina to the lotus feet of the Guru is an act of surrendering the ego. Furthermore, I think all religious branches of the Bharatiya civilization, like Shaivism, Vaishnavism, Buddhism, Jainism, are all the products of the Guru Shishya Parampara. All the Vidyas, like the Vedas, Vedangas, Darshanas, Dharma Shastras, are products of the Guru Shishya Parampara, which have been imparted in the form of Upadesh. Even various schools of philosophy like Advaita and Dvaita have been imparted through the Guru Shishya Parampara. it is, I think, the central focus of our civilization on the Guru Shishya Parampara and everything that it has to offer. That has ensured the success of the followers of the Sanatan Dharma across the world and, of course, across their chosen fields. You know, even today, with the dilution of rituals and the demands of modern life, one still will find that the youth brought up in the environment of the Sanatan Dharma, bowing and touching the feet of his gurus, may it be in today's day, may it be his teachers or parents or priests or anybody that he has great respect for. A child of the Sanatan Dharma, you know, naturally practices this it's a very profound practice of surrendering the ego, even though he may not realize it as such, at least, you know, as long as he's young, you know. Maybe he'll realize it as he grows older and delves deeper into the nuances of our traditions. But you know, I also feel that today the parampara may not largely be followed in its original form. And of course, some may disagree with me, but I feel that uh, in theory, it is not followed, but it is still followed in practice. And that, in my opinion, has been the primary reason for the continuity of traditions in the Kali Yuga amongst the larger population that is not trained in the scriptures. And here, by practice, I mean discipline, values, morals learned from our parents who learned it from theirs, and from our families and friends who are from within the same cultural ethos. The Mahavishwas that our ancestors had in our gurus is still continuing to give its benefits. Um, for instance, most of us don't know what tilaks to wear, but we follow the lead of our elders. We know instinctively to take our shoes off before we enter a temple, or to touch the feet of you know, anybody that we respect, to treat our work as worship, to have familial responsibility, among so many other traditions we are carrying instinctively along with us. In other words, this is the root of practice, as opposed to theory, which is scriptural understanding and the scriptural following of the traditions and rituals of the Guru Shishya Parampara. But having said that, scripturally also, this is sanctioned. To give you an example, Lord Krishna in chapter 4 of the Bhagavad Gita says to Arjuna, when Arjuna is confused before the great war, he says, Kuru karma eva tasmat tvam purva taram kritam, meaning perform your duties just the way it was done in the past by your ancestors. That is good enough. He could have just said, do your duty, but he said, do it as it has been done by your ancestors. This is a reason I feel that our diaspora is so disciplined and is so successful that today, let's say in America, you may obviously know that not just the, you know, not that they're not just the most successful, but they're taken so seriously with respect like no other community. A very simple recent observation I made of how modern society sees us, and in advance I say this, please forgive me for making a reference from Netflix, but in an American series called Away, there's a mission to Mars where 5 superpowers are leading the mission, and those 5 superpowers are US, Russia, China, UK, and India. The Indian astronaut plays a very crucial role. He's not only one of the brightest on board, but the most reliable and loyal. He has been portrayed as a very morally upright sort of an individual. This at least tells me of the values people see us uphold. And there's a reason why Indian Americans, for instance, even though distant from their roots in India, are so successful. Their tradition teaches them about their dharma, leading to great karma. Indian American median household income is, I believe, almost twice of American born households. They have managed with, I think, sheer hard work to permeate the establishment of power centers like the Ivy League universities, politics, Hollywood, media, science, IT, so on and so forth. You know, they permeated all these areas. What does this say about what we are putting out there, and where is it coming from? And of course, I'm not trying to romanticize our heritage or the present situation of the Hindu identity and institutions and say that this is at its optimum point. That would lead to complacency as far as I'm concerned, which is the gateway to a dharmic process. There are some limitations and roadblocks that we must actively continue to clear. For instance, the rational assertion of our Hindu identity or the preservation of our true history, access to scriptural education and understanding the importance of leading by example, use of modern technology to disseminate factual information about current affairs, emphasis on documentation as well as, I believe, restraint from petty judgment of our own youths, but most importantly, mentorship. Um, Mentorship, I feel, would ensure that knowledge and expertise is passed on, that the student treads in the right direction. In this youth, it's important to see mentorship in somewhat the same light that we see the Guru Shishya Parampara. But of course, this is dependent on the Guru as well, and how one can fulfill that duty, or how one can how an individual can recognize a true guru is, of course, a matter of a larger discussion. And as we're limited on time, I think that subject can be left for later. But for now, as I think my time is up, I would like to conclude by saying that the branches of the giant tree of Dharma may be damaged or even cut, but the roots of this tree are still strong. And with that, there will always be hope. With that, Priya, thank you.
Thank you so much, Rami. And you said, there will be hope. And I truly feel that because, till we have life, as they say, the fires of hope won't die, right? So now from South Asia, we heard, our two speakers from India. So now from South Asia, we are going to take a quick stop in the Southeast Asia before going to the Pacific side of the United States. So our next speaker is Anurag Saxena, based in Singapore. Anurag is founder of the India Pride project that focuses on bringing back Indian stolen heritage. He's also a policy thinker and an activist. He has been featured in BBC, Washington Post, Diplomat, Economic Times. I mean, I can just go on and on. He's very accomplished, just like all other speakers. So the tendency to rely on the media narratives to understand the world these days is so strong that we actually make up explanatory stories, regardless of whether the information is accurate. Anurag's talk is going to focus on the anti-Indian narrative, correcting racist media bias and institutionalized misinformation. Anurag, the floor is yours.
Namaskar. Namaskar, everybody, and thank you, Priyaji and Jayji, for pulling this all together. As somebody who likes to think of himself as a doer, I can absolutely imagine the challenge this might have been to pull all of this together. Now, I am going to take us back to the 17th of December 2012. For those of you who don't remember what happened then, we all have heard of the whole Nirbhaya rape case that happened in India, and media has talked plenty about it. Right? Now, on the same day, there were three other pieces of news that came up. One, you had 42-year-old Simon Morris, who in a party got a 15-year-old girl to drink, and in a state of stupor, he raped her. Right? John Anthony Vega raped a 77-year-old lady who, while getting raped, was yelling that, "Hey, would you rape your mother? Would you rape your mother?" Right? And he was later booked and punished for aggravated assault, grievous injury, burglary, involuntary deviant sexual intercourse, and a whole bunch of these things. John Anthony Vega wasn't successful enough in killing the 77-year-old lady he raped. Michael Duane, on the other hand, raped and murdered a 74-year-old woman. All of these news pieces happened on the same date. The Nirbhaya rape, the Simon, Michael, and John case. However, you have only heard about the Nirbhaya case over and over and over and over and over and over again, right? Painting India as the rape capital of the world, right? Now, as terrible as one rape or sexual assault is, we have to have some sense of proportion. We have to be cognizant of what data actually reveals around sexual assaults, sexual abuse, and what have you, right? If you look at a per capita basis, right, the UK has 7.93 rapes per, or sexual assaults, say sexual abuse per 100,000. US, on the other hand, is at 0.33. South Africa is at 8.72, and India is at 0.52. Now let that sink in for a second. The UK is at 7.93 and India is at 0.52 if you look at per capita sexual abuse. Why then do you see India being painted as the villain, right? Take a case of robbery as an example. You are 80 times more likely to get robbed in Australia than you are in US or India. And oh, by the way, if you're thinking I'm just some Rara, Bharatiya, and this and that and whatever it is, let me clarify that all of this is official government data. None of it is a research report, or none of it is some stuff that me or an academician or a journalist or whatever has came up with. All of these is official government data that you can get from individual national statistics and data collection agencies, right? If you think that this misinformation exists on crime data alone, think about look, think about New Zealand. What do you see, right? When I say the word New Zealand, you think about pristine meadows, waterfalls, bungee jumping, acres of glass, essentially the Lord of the Rings image that New Zealand has built in your mind, right? Think of India. What do you think? You think of Slumdog Millionaire, you think of Salam Bombay, you think of overcrowded roads, pollution, gutters that are overflowing, and so on and so forth. Now, let me tell you what data actually shows, right? Data tells you that carbon emissions in terms of per capita tons is 16.2 for USA, 16.8 for Australia. But for India, it's just 1.8. So think about it, right? That's all, UK on a per capita, US on a per capita basis is 8 times more polluting than India is. But what would the media narrative tell you? Media narrative will tell you that India and Indians and our culture perhaps in some way encourage us to be filthy, dirty, and so on and so forth, right? Motorization rates, 797 per 1,000 people in the US, only 18 in India, which kind of explains why we don't pollute as much. Look at what our Bharatiya values of, not necessarily abhorring meat consumption, but we tend to be naturally vegetarian, if not vegan. And all of us now know that methane emissions is one of the biggest causes of global warming. Right, compared to a greater than 90 kgs per capita of meat consumption in most of the developed countries, India today is 1/20th of that, which means we are leading a naturally more woke consumption pattern and saving the environment at the same time, not by putting in any extra effort, but by just living life the way it was handed out to us over generations, right? Now, I could go on and on. India is painted as regressive and blah, 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 blah. And every time an American friend tells me, I tell him, look, dude, you haven't had a female head of state. We've had one. Every time they say, hey, listen, look at the whole Dalit and whatever debate, I tell them, hey, listen, You guys took so long to have a black president. We've had Dalit presidents way before you had your black presidents. Another interesting stuff that data shows once you look at it, because what's happening right now, since Oprah sent that book out to a bunch of CEOs in the US, there seems to be a media narrative which conflates racism and casteism. And don't get me wrong, both of them are wrong wherever they exist, right? Wherever they exist. But guess what? The incarceration rates of blacks in the US is 4 times more than the incarceration rates of SC/STs in India, right? If you're a Dalit in India, you are more likely to get elected as an MLA or an MP, both in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha, than if you're a black in the US or a Latino in the US. You have a far lesser chance of becoming a senator or a congressman, right? The point I'm trying to make here is, whether it's race issues or caste issues, whether it is pollution, whether it is health and disease, whether it is crime rates, you have a huge media narrative which is trying to make us look bad, right? Based on anecdotal information, based on opinion pieces which are really easy to write, right? They're doing it from a clickbait point of view, but as Raj Vedamji said, it's a little more insidious than just stereotyping, right? It is institutionalized racism, it is institutionalized manipulation. And I think that's something we need to hit back at, right? Now, given that I have 1 more minute to go, I don't want to be talking much about establishing the problem statement. It's already given. How do we change this, right? Now, my pet peeve, with due respect to everybody else here, is when I look at our side of the narrative or our side of the cause, I see us talking a lot about research, but rarely about results. We tend to outrage very often, but we don't focus on outcomes very often, right? So if you look at most talks, most presentations, most conversations, they are about the offense. They're about the problem statement. They're about the solution. They're not about the solution. They're always about the problem statement, right? So what happens, therefore, is we end up engaging in outrage Olympics, right? Somebody who writes a right-brained opinion piece, which is based on anecdotal information and not data, we respond to it with an even more emotional response, which doesn't take the conversation anywhere. Now, which is why we need to understand that the way the narrative is built and how we respond to it is broken, and we need to, instead of talking about the fact that it's broken and blah 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 blah, instead of going rudali over it, we need to figure out how to fix it, right? Now, a few months back, Mohandas Pai of Infosys fame, who I don't think needs an introduction. So Mohandas Pai and I, along with Shashank Bhavaraju, got together and set up this thing called Data Reveals, right? Data Reveals is a public utility, available for everybody to use for free, which checks, or rather which empirically tests media narratives and tells you what data says, instead of some kind of racist or biased journalist who's just putting his or her piece of opinion out there, right? Over the next 1 year, we tend to cover a whole bunch of matrices, from crime data to sustainability data, to education data, to prisoner data, to caste data, to women's safety. I mean, think about it, right? We intend for us to have 50 to 80 matrices open to everybody, which you could use purely as a reference tool to say, here is what data says. Doesn't matter what narrative says. Doesn't matter what a bigoted or a Hinduphobe or a racist journalist wants to say. Here is what reality looks like. What happens then when you start countering this journalist with facts is it becomes easy to prove that that there is some kind of an agenda. Even if you're not able to prove that, we're at least able to showcase lazy journalism, right? And that's the agenda. I've run out of time, so my hope is all of you can join us in this journey. It's time for us to stop crying about the bad hand we've been dealt with. It's time for us to end the analysis. It's time for us to start focusing on solutions now. So do check out datareveals.org. That's datareveals.org for whoever is interested. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and the like. People who are much younger than me manage all of that. My two requests to each of you, right? One, please do not take it lying down when somebody tells you come from a culture that sucks. You do not have to take it lying down, right? So please come in. There is a participate button. You can join in. If you're smarter than I am, which is very likely, help us conduct analysis, enrich us, make it, let it be a crowdsourced platform that grows with each of your contributions. And again, I cannot say this enough. Sunshine is the biggest disinfectant. Every time you see somebody bullying you in school, every time you see a bully writing an article, every time you see somebody publishing a blog, push back, throw light. Unless the truth is out there, we will keep having conferences every year just discussing how we've been dealt a bad hand and how, so we'll just be telling stories of how we lost the battle instead of actually winning them. With that, namaskar. Thank you so much for patiently listening, and I look forward to the rest of the sessions.
Thank you so much, Anuragji. This was so, this topic, I mean, as you said, that we can go on and on and on. It is so much needed. And, at this point, being outraged, there's a difference between outrage and outcome, and we have to focus on what the outcome is. And we have to now, voice what we stand for and what we bring to the table. So thank you so much for your insights. Very, very helpful. So, I had already given all of you a hint that from Singapore, we will be going to the Pacific side of the United States. So those who have already done some research on the speakers, you already know who the next speaker is. Our next speaker is from California. Dave Tandon is a part of the Obo movement. Now, I'm very, very, very looking forward to hear what the Obo movement is all about. But from what I learned is, reading the bio, is that it's a movement to transform how we as a society do business, changing the focus from money to the complete fulfillment of the people involved. And in these times when, we are all surrounded by this global pandemic, it's very important that we take our hearts with us when we go to work. So Dave is going to speak about Obo movement, a Dharma-based business model. Devji, the floor is all yours.
So thank you, Priyaji, and namaste, and good morning and good evening to everyone. So I want to thank everyone for taking the time today to hear about a very important initiative for humanity. Something that can have an impact on the world like has not been seen in many, many generations. Something that can get to the root cause of virtually every major challenge facing society today, from climate change to wealth inequality, racial injustice, and everything in between. And it's something that we call the Obo movement. So in our short time today, I'd like to speak mostly about the philosophy of what this movement is about. And then if we have time, I can share a couple of stories of how this philosophy is actually coming to real life, so to speak, through projects and initiatives and businesses that we're actually creating that are running on these principles. And then if anyone would like to learn more and dive deeper into this, we can follow up individually after the conference. So let's begin with the philosophical concept of what this whole thing is about. So Obo is a movement to transform how we as a society do business, changing the focus of business from money, as it is today, to complete fulfillment of the people who are involved in the business, or you could call it Dharma, and actually demonstrating that when we do that, when we change that focus, that money and other worldly prosperity comes to us in even greater spades than the current money first model of and profit first model of today. So if you think about it, we've all been raised in this society under the conventional wisdom that if we pursue money and we achieve it, that we will then be fulfilled, right? But if you study the wisdom of eons from around the world, it's not just our Sanatana Dharma tradition, it's every great philosopher who has ever walked this earth has said the same thing. And they've said the exact opposite of that, that when you pursue fulfillment, that money and other worldly prosperity comes to us through something that is known as the law of attraction. So what if we then turn the purpose of business around now and say, okay, the primary objective of business is no longer money or profits or any of these things. The primary objective of business is for that organization to support the individual needs and life purposes, or you could say swadharma, of the individual people who are involved in that business through their work, and demonstrate that in so doing, it leads to a more prosperous model for all than the current profit first, money first model of today. So a good one-line description of what I'm talking about that captures the essence of this is, if the Buddha were a CEO, how would he run the company? So let's take a moment to think about that for a second and juxtapose it next to what we have today in the global companies and organizations and how our companies are run today. It would look, I'm sure you'll agree, quite different from the current model of today. So let's take a couple of simple examples. Let's talk about transparency. So we have literally a crisis of trust in our businesses today. And trust is one side of the coin. Well, the other side of the coin, the way I see it, is transparency. And if the Buddha were a CEO of a company, would I ask you, would anything in the business whatsoever be hidden? And the answer is no. Why is that? Because if our foundation is rooted in truth, then we have nothing to hide. And when I say everything is open, I mean every single thing is completely open book. You want to see my strategic plan? Here you go. You want to see my operating plan? Here you go. You want to see how much I earn? Here you go. If the Buddha were CEO, what would the objective, the overall objective of the business be? Would it be money, or would it be the dharma, the swadharma, supporting the individual swadharma through the actual work of the individuals that are involved in the business? And I think we know the answer to that question. So this is a very profound opportunity that we have at this juncture in time. And I'd like to take a couple of minutes to share something from the Sanatana Dharma tradition that will convey the magnitude of this opportunity. And it might not leave time to talk about how we are actually doing this in the world, but I think everyone will appreciate the size of the opportunity here when I describe this. So if you think about from the Sanatana Dharma tradition, everything flows from kind of the four master texts of the Vedas, right? They're like every system that we have comes from these four master texts, which are basically a series of texts that explain the principles of how energy works. Now, thousands of years ago, the rishis and the saints and the sages and the seers, they recognized that for us to, as human beings, to use this information that's in the Vedas, we need systems, right? So they developed a whole series of systems that were based on the Vedas. Like, for instance, they developed a system of health and wellness based on the Vedas. That system is known as Ayurveda. They developed a system of spirituality and philosophy based on the Vedas. The system is known as yoga, and there's 5 other philosophical and spiritual systems based on the Vedas. And like that, there are all these other systems. The system of the physical environment is called Vastu, and the system of astrology and numerology is called Jyotish, and the Shastras and Artha Shastras and so forth. So one way to describe what I'm talking about here and what this initiative is we are creating the system that is based on the Vedas of commerce, which was never created. And if you think about it right now, it is the most important system that we have an opportunity now to come together and create. It's the missing Shastra system that we have in our tradition. When you think about when was the last time a Shastra system was created, we now have an opportunity to create a brand new way of conducting ourselves in business that is Dharma first. And the reason this is so important is because if you pick any major societal challenge that we have, from climate change to wealth inequality, and you trace back to the root cause of what is actually driving this, what you will find is in every single case, either the root cause or a massive contributor to it is how we do business and how we make money. And what I'm talking about here is a fundamental transformation as to how business is done and how money is made. So because I don't have much more time here, I'll just share a very simple example of how the work unit actually changes under this model to kind of give a little bit of a concept of how this actually comes to life. And I'll share an example that surely all 200 plus of us have had in our jobs at one point or another. Let's pretend like you're going on stage to give a presentation. And I ask you, in the conventional world, what are you doing? You say, I'm going on stage to give a presentation and I'm feeling a little nervous. In the OBO model, if I ask you, what are you doing? You would say, I am working through my nervousness by giving a presentation. So you see the difference? In both cases, the presentation is getting done, but in the conventional case, the objective is the presentation, the material outcome. In the OBO model, the objective is inner peace by giving the presentation. In other words, the objective is for me to pursue my swadharma and get reconnected with myself by doing the actual work. And so I want to emphasize that this is not an either or model, that you can either pursue the dharma or you can do the work. No, no, no. This is actually changing what work is so that the primary objective is the pursuit of swadharma by doing the actual work. So I've actually already gone a little bit over, and I want to thank everybody for taking the time to listen. It's a very fascinating and impactful initiative, and if anybody would like to learn more, would love to connect with you after the conference.
So thank you so much, Devji. While you were presenting, I was looking at some of the comments that were coming. So I saw Jayji's comment that I quickly read is that, how about wealth creation rooted in dharma? And as the future of work is changing, I see this initiative or this model can surely be incorporated with this lot of, human touch to it rather than just, commercial gains. So thank you once again. And, I just wanted to share one thing that, I read when I was reading your bio, I read that, you had an epiphany and Obo was born. So we all can relate to this, is that sometimes the dreams that come true are the dreams that you never even know you had, right? And so this is very insightful, and thank you so much. And before I go now from the West Coast to the rest of the US, as Devji mentioned about climate change, I wanted to bring to the attention of all the viewers about the devastation we had because of the wildfires in California and Oregon. Climate change is fueling those wildfires in the West, and climate change is real. So we are very honored to have with us our next speaker who works in the environmental services space. Pavan Mangipuram is a communications coordinator with the Healing Our Waters Great Lakes Coalition, an advocacy group dedicated in restoring and preserving the Great Lakes ecosystem, habitat, and freshwater. His talk is going to be on activism as dharma, a Hindu ethic of social justice. Pavan?
Hello, can everyone hear me? I hope.
Yes, we can.
Lovely. Thank you very much for having me. This is a very international audience. I'm a bit intimidated, but I'm sure everything will go fine. I wanted to talk a little bit about my upbringing. My parents are immigrants from India, so I was born and brought up in the United States. So this might be a little interesting to people from that perspective. And to talk a little bit about my Hindu upbringing and how it has informed some of my life decisions and kind of how I have formed an ethic kind of around my understanding. Before I begin, I do want to say these are my interpretations. I'm not a theologian. And these are things that I learned as a child. And so if I do get things incorrect or misinterpret things, I trust that you will not take that as a negative on my teachers who did the best job they could. And it's just very possible that I was a poor student. In any case, growing up, I was very much imbibed with the ethic of Dharma. Dharma is duty. And what I was taught about Dharma was the idea that it is related to your position within society. So you will have your dharma as a son will be to listen to your parents and to honor them and do things. Your dharma as a student will be to study appropriately and get good grades and so forth. But the interesting thing is that that changes over time. So my duty as a son, for instance, will change as I get older and my parents get older, but it is still the same Dharma. And I have taken this idea, this was something that was imbibed upon me from a very young age. And I think a very pivotal story in my life is the Bhagavad Gita story of Krishna's injunction to Arjuna, which is something that I took very much to heart. Now, this is my interpretation, but the crux of the story, as I understood it, was that Arjuna was kind of getting a bit of cold feet before this final battle. He was saying, you know, these are my cousins. This is going to cause a lot of bloodshed. Maybe this isn't worth it. Maybe we shouldn't fight, you know. Maybe like there's another way, and maybe we should just let them win even, you know, if it's going to cause all this bloodshed, it's not worth it. But Krishna says, the Lord Krishna said, no, that is not the correct way to think. That is actually bad. Because what's going to happen then, if you allow evil to win or this injustice to prevail, you know, you are going to be condemning future generations. It's just bad. This is not like doing your duty. Your duty is to combat this injustice. And so I took that very much to heart. And the way that I interpreted that was to say that I have a Dharma in my positionality as a person on this planet. And it is a positive duty to combat injustice. It is not enough to merely say, oh, well, I'm just like going to be a good person and just go about like my life and it'll be fine. It is actually a much more active injunction that is being placed upon me and upon everyone. I mean, really. And so to that, I kind of, you know, in my life, I went to university to become a chemical engineer, but I felt as though that would not be my duty in this world of not so great industrial practices, I guess. I don't want to go much further than that, but I thought that I could do better to my duty to the prevailing world by going into the nonprofit realm. And so previously I was working in the immigration field, trying to help people become US citizens and trying to help them get a more easy immigration regime. Has been a bit demoralizing, but and recently I've now shifted to the environmental field, which I had done some work in the past. But it's always being guided by this larger ethic of action and the larger need to seek out and combat injustice actively, rather than simply just live my life and think that everything will be okay. And this is something that I think that I hope is a correct interpretation of how, you know, we should live as human beings, with compassion and with a fidelity to a duty that goes beyond, you know, our own persons and possibly even our own, you know, immediate surroundings, but truly takes our position in the world as seriously as it deserves. And with all of the implications that has to offer. I do think though that despite the fact that the trappings of some of Hindu traditions and culture, I regret that I'm not as devout and following to, but I think the central core of the ethic is the thing that I hope to embody in my life and also to pass on to my children whenever they may arrive. So with that said, I want to thank you very much for listening to me and my perspective, and I'm happy to answer questions, I suppose, if they arise. Thank you.
So thank you so much. So we are running very low on time now, and we still have 3 speakers to go. So our next speaker is Ananya Patti. She is a youth advocate, campaigner, and she's a campaigner against substance abuse. So her talk is going to focus on youth are the leaders of today. So Ananya.
Thank you so much, Priyaji. Good morning and namaskar to everyone. My name is Ananya Patti and I'm from Chicago, Illinois. I'm currently in college studying public health and pre-law. And I would like to thank you all, just starting off, for your time, your patience, and your understanding as I explain probably one of the most essential concepts of our current time. I'm here today to discuss my work as a young leader, though I do believe so, I must present my identity to you first. I found my purpose on this planet, and ever since doing so, I've dedicated my all to sharing my passion with others. As a young advocate, my purpose is to mobilize the voices of other young leaders as they find their passions in the world alongside myself. I grew up in the suburbs of Madison, Wisconsin, knowing as a little girl that I wanted to change the world. I dreamed one day to make an impact on those around me, and little did I know that impact would spread to other states and nations beyond what I call my own. Growing up, I attended our local mandir, gurudwara, and adopted principles of Buddhism that all stem from the same time period, but was all possible thanks to my incredibly inclusive and accepting parents. The concepts of Dharma and Seva have become a focal point in the beginning of my career. Dharma, meaning my duty, my purpose, my drive that manifested itself in the physical world. And Seva, meaning how I brought this into fruition, what I did to change the lives of those around me. As a young advocate and consultant for an international nonprofit based in DC, I get to work in the field of substance misuse prevention with youth across the world. These youth are equipped with skills they need to go back into their communities and create sustainable, community-wide positive change. After training youth in our organization's curriculums, I created one of my own called Advocacy and Policy that trains youth on how they can create local and state laws in relation to substance misuse prevention in their communities. Turning my experience into a tangible curriculum to share with youth allows me to fulfill my purpose on this earth, and it is a privilege that I will be eternally grateful for. As leaders, especially during such a crucial time period in our history, we must utilize our knowledge and mobilize this new generation. I would not be acting in alignment with my dharma without adding in a portion of nurturing the youth of our world with the tools they need to create positive community change. Throughout my journey of training youth, giving speeches to thousands of people on Capitol Hill, and creating new policies such as statewide ones in Illinois, I have found myself in positions that have brought me some levels of discomfort. Found myself sitting next to our current president discussing substance misuse, or at the United Nations in Vienna with the tag United States Youth Delegate. But my entire journey was less about being Ananya Patti and more about being an agent for change in a world that needed support. I've said this before and I will continue to say this, but what defines a leader is not his or her resume, but more the passion and intention behind the work that he or she does. Simply means that all the designations, all the titles, all the positions that we hold have no value if our intention behind those seats are not pure. For every step of the way, we must assure ourselves that we act in alignment with our highest self, the self that the divine knows the best. Regardless of race, religion, or any other differentiating attributes, these individuals must come together to create collaborative groups that work towards one common goal, whatever that truly may be. Ultimately, we need communities to come together towards a better tomorrow, not just for those who are susceptible to addiction like the work that I do, but alongside others who may be underprivileged in this entire planet as a whole as well. And this change begins with our youth. This is simply because youth are the leaders of today and tomorrow. Every movement in our history has stemmed from incredibly motivated and passionate youth that look towards the future with a perspective of passion and commitment. Their work to change our world manifests from their inner fuel in them that tells them to never stop fighting. With all the revolutions going on in our world right now, I can assure you that youth are the ones proving to others that Black Lives Matter, women's rights matter, LGBTQ rights matter, and all these movements then gain traction for older generations later on. I've seen this with substance misuse prevention in my own field, and I've seen youth, including my own past self and current self, lead the way in changing policies, educating communities, and finding and collaborating with other established community members, much like yourself currently. With a faith like ours, it is truly our duty to hear these voices and do what we can to support the youth in their journey as being young advocates. So I urge you, the next time we see a movement or a cause that needs support, let us find the youth that are impacted by it. Let us guide them with the resources they need, the support they crave, and aid them in amplifying their voice. for this work of changing the entire world cannot be done by just the older generations. This would result in the same cycles we've been in our past generations. Not to say that change hasn't happened, it has, but it was done by the few that challenged the status quo, the ones that challenged what we thought was normal. And by equipping the new generation with the support and the resources they need, we are turning the majority of our population into change agents. We are creating a future with a better global climate, with fewer possible pandemics, and with less substance misuse, which means so much to me, and so much more. At its core, by investing in youth, we are investing in our future. Thank you, and namaskar.
Thank you so much, Ananya. And before I go to my next speaker, I want to quickly make an announcement for the next panel. We are running a bit late because we have still 2 more speakers they have to present their talk. So our next speaker is also a young leader, a politician. And when you have everything, when there are young people there are always new ideas that are that flow. So Neeraj Antani is a state representative from the Ohio's 42nd district, and his talk is going to focus on Hindu Americans in politics and policy. Neeraj?
Well, thank you, Priya. This is Neeraj Antani. Sorry I can't be on video. I had some technical difficulties, but thank you to Dr. Bunsel and to VHPA and everyone for having me once again. It's truly an honor. My name is Neeraj Antani. I serve as a state representative in the Ohio House of Representatives. I've been serving since 2014, and I'm proud to serve as the only Indian and Hindu American state elected official, state or federal elected official in Ohio, and also proudly the youngest Indian and Hindu elected official in the United States. As a Hindu elected official, I feel a very solemn duty that, yes, I'm a representative of my district, but I'm also, a voice for Hindus across Ohio, but also across the nation. As we know, we are seeing, more and more Indian elected officials get elected. Unfortunately, I don't know whether, many of them, unfortunately, live out their Hindu values or, frankly, talk about them in a way that will, benefit our community. It's important to elect, those of us who are Indian or are Hindu, but we need leaders who are willing to sort of own that Hinduism, or that Indianness, if you will. And so, that I believe is very important. I've spoken often about how, Hinduism in the United States is very much at a crossroads. There was a Pew Research poll conducted and has been conducted again recently that shows Hinduism is the least known religion, including from Buddhism, including, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, etc. And Americans' attitudes towards Hinduism is largely neutral. So for Christian and Judaism, it's, they're very known religions, and the thought on their religions is very positive. For Islam, it's very known, but the thought is very negative. For Hinduism, it's actually very neutral, which could be good, but could also be bad, because anything could tip it. And as someone who is a very public person, I am probably one of the more public Hindus in our country. It matters what I do, what other Hindu elected officials do in regards to our religion. I know a couple others have talked about, media and other segments of society. It matters how Hinduism is portrayed. And so, when we are, looking at, Indian Americans and Hindu Americans in office, I think it's very important to remember, what they actually do. I tell this story, about a BAPS temple that, they wanted to build. and the city council, just had height restrictions on buildings. But because of advocacy, they were able to build, the temple to the correct height. And so, advocacy at all levels of government, are very important. We see it right now in our federal government, with the reaction to the Indian government's decision on the abrogation of 370 and on CAA, both of which, I support. But unfortunately, not all Indian/Hindu elected officials have support. We have federally elected officials who claim to be Hindu and claim to be Indian who have become members of the Pakistan caucus. That is very, very troublesome, right? I think, we have to understand that, India, while, is a secular country, is one of the few and the main Hindu majority country. And India's decisions to abrogate 370 and, to do CAA, protect Hindus, is something the U.S., must support. And I believe that, our current federal administration has, even though certain, members of Congress have not. And so, if there's any, argument for, those to get involved in this public sphere, in, politics, in government, it is that. It is because, the federal administration and the Congress are going to decide, their policy on, supporting or not, India's decision on the abrogation of 370 and CAA. State governments are going to decide a variety of issues that, affect Hinduism. Local governments are going to decide, whether temples can be built through their planning and zoning measures. And so, all of these, different avenues are very, very important. And so, I truly appreciate, the opportunity to be with VHPA. Anything I can, be of service, please do let me know. And it's truly an honor for me to be one of the few Hindu elected officials in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So now we are on to our final speaker, and politics currently is dividing us. So let's talk about something that unites us, that's art. So our final speaker is Sunanda Sahai, and she will be speaking on Mithila painting, Dharma, and symbolism. Sunanda ji, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Priya and Jayji and VHPA for this opportunity. When I was given the topic, Influence of Hindu Heritage of Life Choices and Decision, it actually gave me an opportunity to reflect on my own life, how we live our life with the choices. I was writing about the Mithila painting, Dharma, and symbolism and the connection in between. And then I was at the same time reflecting on my life and how it led to the art and my practicing it. My parents were just beginning their internship to be licensed as doctors when I was born. They were super busy with their gruesome hours of internship and struggled to raise me. Both sides of my grandmothers came to the rescue and took me in. And thus, I grew up as a toddler watching my dadi perform long puja and rituals. When I grew up a little bit and came to live with my parents, they were surprised to see that I would pick a talcum powder can, offer it flowers and incense, and do the puja the same way I had seen my dadi do it. Instead of playing with dolls, I was busy with puja rituals. My parents were not too happy as they did not believe in such religious rituals, that too at such an early age. At the age of 5, I held my first Janmashtami fasting that absolutely delighted my dadi, but did not please my parents. Every summer, I would visit my nani, and being a bookworm, I would rummage through her house to find books. Guess what I found at her house to fill my voracious reading appetite? Ramayana, Mahabharata, Gita, and a monthly religious magazine called Kalyan. My parents could barely tolerate my regular fasting and puja, but became alarmed when all of a sudden I turned into a vegetarian. They were wondering if I might renounce the world next. This is how I was growing up, making choices. When I decided not to be a doctor and started my undergrad, my parents thought that it was time for me to get married. One of their criteria was that the groom had to be a non-vegetarian. They found such a family and totally adored my husband. Interestingly, my mother-in-law loved that I held occasional fasting and did regular puja. Moreover, my husband practiced yoga and meditation every day, and as spiritual as I had been. Life was right back to where I had started as a child. After my marriage, I earned masters in literature, and I was teaching in a college while pursuing my PhD. And then came an interesting turn in our life. My husband decided to study MBA at U Chicago. He came to US and I went to live with my parents so that I get help raising our boys. My mom suggested that I learn Mithila painting, which was the famous folk art of Bihar, my home state. I grew up with this ancient art form all around me as my parents were great patrons of this art and supported several artists by buying or commissioning their works. The origin of the art form is considered to be the Ramayana. Princess Sita was from Mithila and was known as Mathili, which is now the language of Mithila where I grew up. The art form basically depicts the stories from our epics and daily lives and rituals of Mithila. Mind you, the art form is 2500 years old at least. Since I was familiar with the stories from our epics, I decided to take lessons while I was with my parents and waiting to join my husband in US. It was just a hobby at that time, and after I joined my husband in Chicago, I decided to devote my time to raising our boys, being around them and volunteering at their school. I forgot all about the art I had so painstakingly learned. A few years later, we moved to Massachusetts. I was again busy volunteering at schools, libraries, and other community places where I learned that Peabody Essex Museum is organizing an event on India and is looking for an Indian painter who can paint in Indian folk style. They were inaugurating M.F. Husain's painting Mahabharat and combining with a book signing by Shashi Tharoor of his book Mahabharat. I was invited to conduct a workshop based on the same theme. What a great opportunity. I had never even imagined of having such an opportunity. It seemed that God gave me the direction of my life. I conducted a wonderful workshop there, and after that, I never looked back. I created a series of Ramayana and Mahabharata paintings and have displayed since then these paintings everywhere in New England, conducted dozens of workshops, talks, and residency in most of the museums, schools, colleges, including Harvard University, and received several awards by towns and the state. Now I teach this art so that it continues to flourish and doesn't recede with me. In my art classes, my students and I discuss various stories from our epics, and I let them choose what they want to paint based on the stories and philosophy they explored. And thus, my days pass in teaching and preserving our priceless Hindu heritage. When I get an opportunity to go back to India, I try to learn art forms from other regions and teachers. Over time, I learned several folk and tribal art forms of India. It is becoming easier for me to visualize and paint the stories from our timeless epics. As I delve deeper in our epics, I learn about the science, philosophy, and symbolism behind the stories and their characters. Symbolism is a whole different theme in folk art that needs to be discussed separately. I will just mention one example of symbolism from the story of Krishna and gopis, searching for him that symbolizes soul and super soul. Gopis keep searching for Krishna, not realizing that he resides within themselves. Same way we keep looking for God everywhere without realizing that he resides within us. In fact, even the name Radha, which is the reverse of Dhara, means a stream that flows back to the source. Shiva is considered to be the first yogi. If you remember the story of Mahabharata, the 5 Pandavas, they symbolize the 5 sense organs. And you have to, if you do not keep them in control, if we do not check them, that can lead to destruction. I'm intrigued how my life has taken a full circle without any planning from me. My life choices and decisions were already planned for me. All I needed to do was to become open to these possibilities. Support the folk art if you can, because they have our deepest roots, culture, and history in that. Thank you so much.